2019 was kind of a breakout year for budget or at least lower end smartphones. And we're seeing a trend in 2020 where that's really going to increase. I'm Jason Cipriani with Jason Perlow. This is Jason Squared, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So Jason, budget friendly mid-tier smartphones, there's a reason that they're hitting, the sub $500, $600 price point. What is that?
That's because the regular smartphones cost over $1,000, Jason.
Yeah, right. But there's a key component to making that price point realistic, right?
Yes. So primarily what we're looking at is certain chipsets being released by the primarily component manufacturers. Now, we really, in the Android space, we have to start with Qualcomm, right? Because Qualcomm makes the Snapdragon series of processors and wireless chipsets that go into basically every single Android smartphone in existence, save for a few companies, which we'll get into. The Snapdragon 855 series is what we were using last year in the what we would call the hero or the
flagship.
The flagships, your S10s, your Note 10s, your Pixel 4s, all those things, right? Use the Snapdragon 855 series chip, and that was pretty much in the bill of materials that were used, along with the I think it's the X5 modem, or is it the X15 LTE modem, made basically that basic set of parts available to all the major manufacturers. Now, that unfortunately, most of the phones that were using that chip, were ended up being over $700. In terms of, that was kind of like the base cost. And so that's problematic, right? So what we were looking to do is produce a more of a lower end chip that had decent capabilities, and we started to see that with the 700 series last year, but they weren't quite powerful enough to really reach the capabilities of the 860 or the 850 series. Now there's going to be an 865 series for the flagship phones this year, but that's still going to be expensive. Now there is a chip called the 720G series.
Sure. Yeah.
That Qualcomm has just introduced at CES. That will have very fast, GPU capabilities for your kids that are gamers. Plus, it's got Wi-Fi 6 capabilities. So it should be a game changer for the low end. So you should be able to see phones in the $400 or less range with this 720G chip that have some pretty darn good capabilities. They shouldn't be phones that people should say, I feel underpowered, or I can't play my games, I can't do my stuff. They should be very responsive phones at the $400 level with this particular chipset.
Yeah, absolutely. And smartphones reaching $1,000, the four-figure price mark a few years ago was kind of nauseating. And you and I have talked about it quite a bit, that it's just too extreme, and at some point it has to break, right? But then comes along 5G. And then we see a few $100s added onto that already expensive price, like with the Galaxy S10 5G or the Note 10 5G. We're pushing $1,200, $1,400, $1,500 for the base model 5G phone. It was getting a little tiring. So seeing lower end phones come about, hitting the $400 price range, $200. There's been some really good phones in 2019, but looking forward to 5G, Qualcomm saw this trend, and they're also releasing the Snapdragon 765, which is a mid-tier processor, which is going to be more affordable for manufacturers and by extension consumers, that also introduces 5G connectivity to the phones. Now, we're not sure exactly what the price points for those phones are going to be and how much that's going to add to the overall cost. But the fact that Qualcomm has the foresight and wherewithal to say, hey, we probably should come up with a mid-tier 5G solution, so we're not charging $1,400, or manufacturers aren't charging $1,400 for a smartphone, says a lot. And I'm really looking forward to some of those mid-tier 5G smartphones. Now, so let's talk about manufacturers, makers of these phones, and kind of what we're expecting this year. Let's start with Motorola. Lenovo owns them. They're a great company. They've had some really good budget-friendly smartphones. What do you think?
I think Motorola is a sort of, an under the radar player for, a lot of the tech industry when we talk about smartphones, but also in the general public, when people say, oh, the new Samsung's coming out, I got to get a new Samsung. Motorola makes a fantastic phone for the money. In fact, the G7, which was kind of last year's low end, budget phone flagship for Motorola, is at a really good price point right now. And they just came out with the G8, which is the sequel to that phone. That the high end version of that phone is $250. The G8 Play, which is sort of the lower spec version of that phone, which I think would be fine for kids, is $150. You can still get G7s at, the high end G7s probably in the $200 range now. If you look enough, it's a solid, again, it's a solid device for teens who are text and Facebook and Instagram driven with a ton of features on them. It's a great phone for the money.
Yeah, I reviewed multiple G7 variants last year and enjoyed using every single one of them. They had multiple cameras, the high-end flagship-like features, a zoom in and a zoom out via the camera, portrait mode. The displays were great. They're not 1080p high definition displays, but 720p displays are just fine for most people. Battery life was phenomenal. That's part of having a lower end processor that doesn't require as much power, and a display that doesn't require as much power to light up as well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Motorola has coming. There's rumors of a new G8 and a G8 Power that have a hole punch display that is, just a single dot in the display to allow for the front facing camera. So be interesting to see over the coming months what Motorola does there. Now, ZTE is a company that has the Axon line. I haven't used any of their products for a few years, but I know you recently got some time with the Axon Pro 10 and leading into this year.
It's a phenomenal phone for the money. I think you can buy one right now on the street for about $449. It uses the same Qualcomm 855 that the Pixel 4 uses, that the S10 uses, that the Note 10 uses. You can get one with 8 or 12 gigs of RAM. It's got 256 gigabytes of storage is standard in them. It doesn't have the highest end display that the Samsung has, but at the same time, $449 for that type of a phone with the components that are in it, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I could buy 3 of those phones for what I paid for my iPhone 11 Pro Max, which is that's saying a lot. And you're getting a good quality phone, Android phone that runs, pretty well from what you've said. So OnePlus is another phone maker who has done a lot in the few years it's been around. They started off at the very low end. They're starting to creep higher and higher with premium devices. It's $700 range. They've actually hit $599 with the OnePlus 7T.
Yep.
These are high quality phones that use all of the same core components as what Samsung uses and other high end manufacturers. Have you got a chance to play around with any of the OnePlus phones?
I had I started with the OnePlus One, and I then got to play with the OnePlus 6 a couple of years later. I think the OnePlus 6 was a great phone for the money. I think you can still find them out there if you look hard enough, and it's a solid phone. It has been updated to Android 10. So, and I know has the 7 been upgraded to 10 yet? I'm not sure, but
it has.
Yeah, so all those phones have modern software on them,
and they support those phones. For years. Android makers don't really support their phones, especially when it comes to budget devices, but OnePlus continues to issue software updates for older phones that most manufacturers would have abandoned by now.
Yeah, and so that it's a no-brainer buy, especially if you get one at a good price, is what I'm going to say. So when we start talking about Chinese companies, right, the 800-pound Chinese gorilla in the room, which we wish we would see more of in the United States, is Huawei. And of course, we have this trade war going on with China. Recently, I think there might be an opening for it because the UK recently just allowed Huawei to build out the 5G network in the UK. That was the announcement this week. They're going to allow them to do it with some oversight, which means that their phones will still be in the UK. Right now, we don't import Huawei or their company, which is Honor, that they use heavily in Latin America and in the EMEA which is a kind of a budget brand of Huawei phone. Huawei makes their own chips. They don't buy them from Qualcomm. Their 980 and 990 Kirin series processors are very powerful. And I mean, we've done benchmark tests against Qualcomm, and they beat them in a couple of categories. I find them to be more power efficient, generally speaking. Solid technology company. Now,
Sure.
I think that if we were to allow them into the United States, I think it would really cause things to be much more competitive than they are now, especially at the super premium level. Prices would have to be driven down. The main concern with Huawei going forward is whether or not they can maintain their Google Play licensing, and if they can't, what can they replace it with? You
Right.
know,
Yeah. As of right now, they don't have a Google Play licensing for any new products. They just struck a deal with TomTom to provide maps and navigation on the products available outside of the US. But the Android phone that you buy from Huawei or the Honor brand right now is just an open source project that Huawei has customized the
yep,
software on. You won't find any Google services on it. You won't find
you know,
Gmail, Google Maps, none of that. Huawei and Honor are a great brand to talk about, but until things loosen up here in the US, it's unfortunate that consumers are going to miss out on
yeah,
that.
we're being deprived of it essentially, and
Absolutely.
for an artificial reason, no other reason. So, speaking of their Google licensing, so Google came out with the Pixel 3a in May of 2019. Now, I thought this was a phenomenal phone for the money. I think it was at $399 it was released at originally.
Yeah, $399 and I think $379 for the XL.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of mishigas going on with the storage amounts and things like that. But for the most part, it was a great phone. I actually thought it was a better offering than the Pixel 4, which came very late in the year. It was a very expensive device that I think disappointed when compared with what Samsung and all the other Android players offered, let alone Apple. The 4A might be the better phone for people this year, assuming it comes out in the same time frame it did, which would be May.
Yeah.
And it would depend on what chip drives it, whether it's going to be last year's it's 720s, or they're going to go with the new the 720G or the 765. If they maintain that pricing at $399, I think it would be a great product.
Yeah, my top pick for budget-friendly phones last year in 2019 was the Pixel 3a or 3a XL. It was a great phone, affordable. You could find them on sale for $299 or less at sometimes. Amazon did all these flash sales where it was just ridiculously cheap to get a Pixel phone, which has Google's monthly updates, Google Photos backup, all that stuff that Google is known for with its Pixel lineup, but very cheap. And they kept the camera the same as their top-end phone, which is the biggest draw to Pixel overall, I think. So Pixel, hopefully we'll see Pixel 4a, 4a XL here in May-ish. I know there's already rumors, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Google does there. Samsung has its own version of low-end phones. It's usually the A series. I really recently reviewed the Samsung A50, which was a great $250, $300 unlocked phone that works on any carriers. Basically, it is a cheaper version of the Galaxy S10 with all the same features. I honestly, in my 2 weeks using the phone, I didn't see really that big of a difference.
What did they cheap out on that phone?
It's a different processor and the display. So I don't remember the exact processor off the top of my head.
Are they using their own Exynos, or are they using a Qualcomm in it?
Yeah, they're using their own stuff.
That's probably why. Yeah.
Yep. And the display wasn't, the quad HD, all of that. But outside of, I would have never guessed that was a $250, $300 phone. The A series phones are great. I know they've recently announced the A70, I believe. And these are all phones that are, if you love Samsung's products, their interface and the way they work, you really can't go wrong with any of Samsung's A series devices.
Cool. So I know we had a cheap 5G phone that was announced at CES. Did you have a chance to look at that thing?
It was a TCL 10 series is what it was. So TCL is behind Alcatel, and they own the BlackBerry brand for phones now. They also make TVs. That's what they're most known for. But they own all these sub-brands of smartphones. And so finally, TCL came out and said, we're going to announce our own premium brand of phones. We're going to call it the 10 series. But we're still going to hit our affordable price point that we're known for. So what stole the show for me, and this was announced at CES, was the 10 series 5G. And we don't know much about it yet. They're going to announce more about it next month at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, but they have said they will release a 5G Android powered phone for under $500,
Wow.
which,
That's
like
killer.
I said earlier, 5G phones are normally 13, 14, 1500 bucks. If they hit that price point and the rest of the specs match up and they're able to provide a good experience, they're going to sell a ton of them, especially for those early adopters who just
Yep.
want 5G but don't want to spend, over $1,000 on a phone. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what TCL does there.
Yeah. So let's talk about, the 800-pound gorilla that's waiting in the room, right? Apple.
Yeah.
Uh, the last time Apple released a lower cost phone, it was the SE. They sold a ton of them.
Yep.
And everyone has been waiting for a sequel to this for several years now. Right now, the iPhone 8 is their loss leader at $449, which I think is a great phone. I had my mom buy one. She loves it. It's still a very solid device. And the A11 chip in it actually smashes most of the Android phones on the market and still have computation capability. But it is getting a little worse for wear. It might not make it for 5 years on the current Apple, iOS upgrade path. It's probably good for another 3. Although some are saying that iOS 14 will be deployed even to the SE, so that it might get us another year. An A13 chip upgrade would really make the iPhone 8 design a nice lower end device, and this might be happening with the iPhone 9, which of course we'd expect there to be no 3D touch. We probably would still have to maintain a Touch ID sensor.
Yeah.
If they priced it at $400 or $500, this would pretty much annihilate anything on the market, all high-end Androids included.
Yeah. So the current rumor right now is that this phone's gearing up for production, may already be in production, and we'll see it unveiled in March. And maybe call the iPhone 9, which technically there isn't an iPhone 9, so the name's available. But yeah, a low end, not low end, because it's still going to have all the same specs and processing power as their higher end phones, but a budget friendly iPhone would, the SE sold a ton, and I would imagine the iPhone 9 would sell like crazy. The iPhone 11 is Apple's top selling phone right now, or was through the holiday season, at $699. Do you imagine a phone at $399?
Well, yeah, but plus you're coming in, if you're a prior Apple owner, you go in with an upgrade and a trade-in, you're gonna knock that down a little bit too. So that's how that cycle keeps going on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
One thing I want to add about all these phones and these manufacturers, and we haven't spoken about it yet, and I really don't want to talk about it, but I think we kind of have to address it, is all these phones are made in China. Now, we know what's going on in China right now. In the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, we have seen the tremendous outbreak of this coronavirus. We hope that this gets resolved. We hope that these people get better soon. We hope that the medical teams can do their best. But we know that it's going to affect production in these major cities like Shenzhen, and all these cities that are being locked down now from travel. Are all major production centers for all these types of technologies.
Yeah.
And if people can't go to work, if transportation is inhibited, it's going to affect the output of the entire technology industry in China. So any predictions that we have about them being able to produce these phones is going to be 100% dependent on people being able to go out and go to work.
Yeah,
right?
great point. Great point.
So a caveat with that.
Absolutely. And I think overall, though, I hope everyone gets better, and they're able to get that under control. Overall, going into the rest of the year, we have a lot to look forward to with saving money and getting high quality smartphones. And I can't wait to see some of these start hitting the market, as soon as they can. I think that's probably a good place to end. I'm Jason Cipriani.
And I'm Jason Perillo.
And this is Jason Squared. Make sure to check out more of our videos at zdnet.com.